causes irreparable harm to victims, who never forget that no one was held accountable for what happened to them, and the women in her own family, including her mum Lynn, agree. Through Virginia's podcast, their voices and feelings are now being heard because they, along with many experts, believe that if sexual abuse is not spoken about and addressed, it can go on to kill, as it did with Alex. Alex's story. Virginia collaborated with journalist Steve Jackson to make the ambitious, courageous podcast, My Sister's Secrets. Virginia, 32, tells Crime Monthly, "The podcast was born from an idea I pitched to the Australian newspaper after Alex's death, where I would go back in time and ask relatives what they knew about what my sister and I had suffered as children. The things no one talked about." It became a mouthpiece for Alex. In the pod, Virginia explains that she is speaking up for her sister, who can no longer speak for herself. Virginia was tired of secrets, tired of trying to protect people, and angry to see Alex's abusers get away with the appalling damage they inflicted on her. Neither of her perpetrators have been brought to justice, and while Virginia's step-grandfather is dead, Alex's unnamed rapist is allowed to walk free, until, if ever, there is enough evidence to prosecute him. Both men had allegedly committed sexual crimes against other women and girls, some of whom came forward to take part in the podcast. Alex was only around 3 years old when she was first abused by her grandmother's second husband, who abused her over the next few years. Although very young herself, she later tried to protect Sister Virginia from him. It was something she was quite rightly proud of later. Though a small child, her selfless instinct was that her little sister would not suffer the same horror she did. Sadly, though, their abuser did gain access to Virginia and assaulted her. And to rub salt in the wound, while Virginia interviewed friends and relatives for the podcast, she learned that it had not only been the one time she remembered. Her one memory was of her granddad beckoning her to sit on his knee while she was playing on her Game Boy, and then him putting his hands inside her underwear. Even though she was only 4, she had known something was wrong, but she says, "I was too shocked and frightened to act, so frozen. She did nothing until her grandmother came in, saw what was going on, and slapped her husband's arm away." Now, Virginia realizes this is called the freeze response, which is very common in victims of abuse, especially children, who are essentially powerless. For years, she'd wondered if she'd been complicit, because she hadn't moved away or told him to stop, and to her horror, she learned it had happened on another occasion, she should have gone to the police there and then, but she does admit that she was protecting the wrong people. Virginia had previously said that she could understand the complex situation her mother faced. She told The Australian it was about not wanting to shatter the family by pressing charges and effectively going public to the whole community with the allegations. Not wanting the general public to know the most intimate details of what has gone on between her daughter's legs. Not wanting to put a 7-year-old through court proceedings. There was always the chance that Alex wouldn't be believed if the girls' abuser denied their claims in court, or, as a child, she could have been harmed under the pressure of a courtroom. Lynn also worried that the girls go into school with other pupils who might know about the case, but admits she made mistakes in trying to protect her daughters. All these thoughts, Virginia believes, made it less likely for those nearest her to talk about the abuse, in an effort to help the girls move past the trauma. However, Lynn has said, not talking about it made us more scared of what had happened. There was no debrief. It was an episode of our lives effectively left unresolved. This led to the horribly confusing situations for the young girls to face alone. With no one talking about the abuse, they had to try to live normally. At their grandfather's funeral, they heard people talking about the great guy he had been. It made Virginia start to believe that maybe what had taken place was acceptable. A brave face. Alex and Virginia pretended for years that everything was fine. They excelled at school and went to university, which allowed their family to believe they had not been affected by the abuse. However, cracks started to show in their middle-class lifestyle. Virginia developed an eating disorder and Alex a drug habit. She had started off by drinking and partying hard, before graduating from alcohol to narcotics, mixing both in large quantities. Virginia says the weight of the secret was weighing Alex down, so she turned to drugs to numb the pain. Alex successfully graduated as a vet, but her addiction worsened, fueled by the medicines she had access to. In 2016, at the age of 28, she had her first overdose. It wasn't until after this that Alex confided that she had been raped by a male relative when she was a teenager, further to the abuse suffered at the hands of her granddad. Virginia had gone on to start a family, the truth. We are absolutely committed to doing so, to allow them to gain an understanding of what happened to Leah. Leah's parents and sister laid flowers at the property, which was close to where Leah was last seen, as they awaited the ID. Our darkest fears have come true. We only need to be apart a little longer. We have so missed you for so long already, they wrote on an accompanying note. Leah was last seen on 15th February 2019 as she walked to work at a finance company in Milton Keynes. Her disappearance sparked a huge search, with police marking more than 4,000 house-to-house inquiries and reviewing 1,200 hours of CCTV footage. US serial killer arrested. Suspected Californian serial killer Wesley Brownlee has been arrested while out hunting for his next victim. He had been driving in Stockton on 16th October, armed with a handgun, when he was stopped by police. Based on tips coming into the department and Stockton Crime Stoppers, we were able to zero in on a possible suspect, said Police Chief Stanley McFadden. Our surveillance team followed this person while he was driving. We watched his patterns and determined he was on a mission to kill. Brownlee, 43, is accused of fatally shooting 6 men and injuring a woman during an 18-month period in Stockton and Oakland. Pensioner killed in money row. Jurors at the trial of property developer Gemma Mitchell have been told pensioner Mi Quen Chong was beheaded in a row over money. Mitchell, 38, is accused of killing 67-year-old Mi after they argued over funds. The Old Bailey heard that Mi, who had met Mitchell at church the year before, had promised to invest £200,000 in Mitchell's family home, which was in a state of disrepair and described as a financial disaster, before changing her mind, allegedly leading to a heated confrontation between the pair. Although they had been friendly, the evidence suggests that they had recently fallen out over money. Prosecutor Deanna here said, phone messages between the devout Christians showed Me, also known as Deborah, urging Mitchell to sell her beloved house, with an estimated value of £4 million. Sell it and enjoy the money. was removed from outside the couple's £500,000 cottage, as it was thought Diane's body could have been transported inside. CCTV was also important at the trial, as David was caught on camera pawning his wife's jewellery days after she supposedly went missing. He also sent fake texts from her phone the night he reported her missing. He arranged for a man to come to the couple's home for sex. Years on, the Alps killings, where the murder of a British family and a cyclist in the French Alps relationship quickly soured due to a dispute over their inheritance. However, the evidence failed to hold up and Zaid was released without charge. New hope. With leads related to the Ali family drying up, attention turned to a motorcyclist Brett Martin reported seeing immediately prior to his horror discovery. About 200-300 meters from the scene, a motorcycle came slowly past me. other children on his laptop. It was horrific to hear. Bridger was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of release, but it gave us little solace, as that September we had to hold April's funeral without her body, as he'd refused to say where she was. The loss of our sweet April took a massive toll on the family. Mum went through bad depression and could barely get out of bed, while Dad Paul had to deal with his own grief, as well as Mum's, mine and my brother Harley's, then 10. So I took on a more adult role, doing household chores alongside my schoolwork. But overall, I didn't cope well. I felt I had to stay strong for my family, and wrongly believed that expressing my emotions would make me seem weak. Instead, I became self-destructive. Alcohol was my comfort blanket, because I wanted to escape reality. I was snappy with everyone I loved, and there was no reasoning with me. Months later, a friend asked me, "What would April think if she saw you now?" It hit me hard. I was angry, but I needed to hear it. It was the one thing that encouraged me to turn my life around. I'd previously refused counselling, but a year later, I began sessions which helped. April's birthdays and anniversaries of her death passed. We marked what would have been her 6th birthday with a party and balloon release, but I soon took a step back from them. The emotion involved was difficult to process. After college, I stopped attending my counselling sessions, but I was still anxious and depressed. So aged 20, I returned and have been going since. I don't attend as regularly as I once did, but I often go for checkups, especially when I start to feel a change in my mood, to stop me from spiralling downward. I also now have a good relationship with alcohol. I can go for a couple of drinks without feeling the need to take it too far. I work as a carer, which I love, and am engaged to my partner of 3 years. I can't wait for us to get married. It's hard to comprehend that it's been 10 years since we lost April. Time has gone so fast, and I still think about her every day. She's always on my mind, even if I don't realise it. After laying the flowers on April's grave for the anniversary, I saw my family and tried to remember the happier times with my sister. For every year to come, I want to associate that day with April, her memory, who she was as